One of the things that has stayed on my mind during the course of the week is how to keep the conversation very relatable and adaptable to people on their daily lives. You know, if we do not understand that we need to be able to connect the dots between where we are and where we are going, we will continue to self-automate instead of self-regulate. We will self-automate and be in a continuous state of entropy, where things are. Entropy is the natural state of things to go into disorder. That's why weeds will grow on the ground even if you don't plant anything there. You know, it takes nurture to get nature to be useful. If you have something that is of nature, like the sun is nature, if you're going to convert the energy of the sun, you have to nurture it. You have to put it through some regimented protocol for you to be able to make the best use of it. So if we don't come to a point where we can connect the dots between what we need to do on a daily basis, we will self-automate instead of self-regulate. One of the things you need to do to self-regulate is to imbibe certain protocols into your subconscious. These protocols will allow you to self-regulate. You will not self-automate, because when you self-automate, you are doing everything as it comes. You know, anywhere belle face, if I can put it that way. We're in for a long haul. We need to get everybody involved in this level of conversation. This is not something that you can start and stop. It's not something that we can do by ourselves. We need to get everybody involved. I said last week that we're starting a brand of religion called, let's call them nationalists. I said something, we're starting a religion of social transformation. I called it a religion because we are going to take a lot of things from the model of religious activities that we have run in the country every Sunday, particular time to particular time. But before I go on today, which I said I was going to really keep it brief, I'll try to stay within 10, 15, 20 minutes. I was thinking that I would be able to take us through some foundational conversation around what social transformation is and how it is an engine or a catalyst to national development. It's a catalyst because a catalyst is that chemical compound. It's a compound that speeds up a chemical reaction. I did some science. It speeds up a chemical reaction without being used up in itself, without being consumed. So it can speed up a process without losing its own form itself. So when you look at social transformation as an enabler of national development, you will see that social transformation is in itself an end. It's not a means to an end. Is in itself an end that can speed up national development without necessarily being consumed in the process. What is social transformation? Social transformation is the fundamental and the sustained evolution of values, behaviors, systems, structures, and institutions. You know, in the process of what we are doing, which is going to really rely on advocacy, education, social reorientation, and social intervention, it is important that we will not do too much of theory work, but we will do a lot of education and social reorientation. So you have situations where we have these conversations on a regular basis. We bring in experts to come and talk. Maybe not even experts. People that are doing things in their daily life. I mean, it would be nice to have Adeni in the house to, take one of these sessions. We'll write a lot of people that we know, some people that we don't know, especially if you are within the frame of reference of a nationalist or a progressive, somebody that you can say that is involved in some form of developmental work. There's always something to share. If you're an entrepreneur, there's something to share around the economy. There's something to share around, political system. There's something to share. But we really don't want to get into politics. Like I said, we are really very focused on national development, right? And so I was saying that social transformation is that fundamental and sustained evolution, or should I call it, it's a fundamental and sustained shift in values, behaviors, systems, structures, and institutions. According to Why Nations Fail, James Achimoglu, they say that nations fail because of weak institutions. But institutions don't just erupt from nowhere. Institutions are an organized and a coordinated, system that regulates and governs activities in the society. Those are institutions. So you have institutions like family, institutions like religious institutions, educational institutions. You have institutions like political institutions. And so institutions are in different cadres. The family is an institution in itself. But before we get to institutions, remember that there are values, there are behaviors, there are systems, structures, and institutions. So let's take what values are. What are values? There are certain things that you can't jump. You can't jump values and go into behaviors. You can't jump behaviors and go into, systems or structures. You can't jump structures and systems and go into institutions. So when you see weak institutions, you can really tell where the problem is. A lot of people have agitated for state policing. But I can tell you for a fact, without consulting any spiritual medium or any, spiritual entity out there, if we create 32, if they pass the law for state policing in our country and we start it, I can tell you for a fact that it will take the frame of reference off the existing police force, because that is what people know. And before we are very quick to jump and criticize all around, we need to begin to see where the golden thread connects everything together. One of the major classes of people that we complain about, and I have a big problem with people that complain. It's one of the reasons why we started the collective conversations. But again, we can't get to that point of criticizing complainers if we don't show them what to do instead of complaining. If you don't train them, don't blame them. I'm saying to you that one of the people that we like to criticize the most is the political class. But hold that thought. The next category of people, I'm going to put two categories of people side by side. So I have the political class and the police force. Those two people get a lot of criticism from our society, from the general people. Let's not use the word masses, but from the general society. But guess what? These are two categories of people at two different spectrums. We can say categorically that the political class and the elite are in the 1%, while you have the police force who are down there. Some of them are arguably even earning below what they should earn. But there's a golden thread that connects everything together. These are people who are part of society. When a policeman who you are not satisfied with the way he carries out his duty, when he removes his uniform, he is but a part of the society. When a politician gets out of office, he is but a part of the society. So where do we connect the dots? How do we ensure that the critical mass of people within the society embody the right value, the right behavior? They organize that into good structures and systems, that form the foundations of institutions. That is exactly what social transformation is about. And that is what we are taking on as a transgenerational journey. It's not something that you can just wake up into. And I think that to buttress what I'm trying to say and why we have started this conversation, I'm going to play a clip, very soon, where Pastor Poju was saying something about how things get to move. Because I've gotten a couple of people ask me, oh, so why are you doing this? What is it, and sometimes you doubt yourself, you're not even sure. I mean, for example, today we've had enough challenges already to even dampen my mood. It kind of even scattered all the flow that I had, all my preparation and all of that. But that is exactly what happens when you are building systems. When you are building stuff, you're going to have a situation where things don't go as planned. Do you throw in the towel or do you continue to go? And everything that you see today was created by somebody who actually put themselves in the ring, right? So if I can take a few of the things that I've talked about today, what are values? What are our behavior? How does it impact systems and structures? Structures like social class. So what's the structure of social class in Nigeria today? How can we change it from where it is to where we want it to be? We are very quick to always point the finger to the politician, but we don't look inward. There's a popular portion of scripture that says when you want to remove the speck in someone else's eye, there's a log in your own eye. There is a prevalent classist structure within the social classes of critical mass of citizens. It's a prevalent classist. When you say we're a classist society, we discriminate within ourselves on what we want or how we want to be perceived. It is why you will have things like, I better pass my neighbor, become a household ringtone because we are predominantly a classist society. And how does that classism as a structure, as a social structure, influence values? Because if you have somebody that is working with you or working for you, and you are such a classist to that person, you look down on them in a condescending way or make them feel like they are not good enough, guess what? It is going to have an adverse effect on their value system, because they will sometimes do almost anything possible to gain social class and social status. And that's why you see a lot of people commit fraud. Sometimes it's not because they want to commit fraud, but because they want to keep up with the social structure in the society. So how do we unbundle all of these kind of mindsets and begin to shift mindset? Remember, social transformation is a fundamental and sustained shift in values, behaviors, and systems and institutions, right? So that's that. I think I wrote here that social transformation is the evolution of how people relate, how they govern, how they learn, and how they work, how they relate, how they govern, how they work, how they learn, and how they live. When we are able to get ourselves into that space, and we are evolving, because evolution in itself is a continuous transformation. So when you say something is evolving, it's not static. So that fundamental shift or that fundamental evolution that happens to our values, meaning that if we embody a particular value system today, if in tomorrow's world we find that that is becoming obsolete and archaic, just by natural evolution, we should be able to come up with new values, right? Behaviors are actions and inactions to their actions and inactions of internal or external stimuli, environmental changes, social interactions, thoughts, or feelings. So you remember that values are your ideals, your what you will call your belief system. Values are fundamental beliefs and ideals of that individuals hold, guiding their decisions and behaviors by defining what they consider important, right, or desirable. So, what are the things that society personally would think that the critical mass considers important, desirable, or valuable? What are the things that we can all agree to that these things are right? What are the values? Do we hold, if you look at the fabric of the society today, can you adequately say that these are the values that the average Nigerian finds ideal? When you go into one organization and the other organization and the other organization, these are the values that you think or that we see that people find that are consistent. These values is what we will now translate into actions and inactions when we have internal or external stimuli. Meaning that if we find ourselves in a situation, how do we behave? We behave from an offshoot of our values. So if we don't have considerably standardized good value system of what is desirable and right in any given situation, then when we need to respond to external or internal stimuli, we will find out that we are acting out of character. And it is when we are able to do that that we go into what we do as a system or a structure, which is a group of interconnected components that work together to form a unified whole. So when you are looking at organizational values, personal values, societal values, all of that becomes into a system. It becomes a structure. It becomes the relationship between groups of people. How do the social class A people behave generally to the social class C people? These are the simple things that translate into how we interact on a daily basis, that translate into things that we do in our organizations, that will now cascade into institutions. Because when you now look into institutions, you now begin to go into religious institutions, social institutions like the family, educational institutions. You get into institutions like, the police, as the police force, the institutions of law and order, the legal frameworks, legal systems, and that's when you begin to see cracks in the whole. And because people are coming with behaviors, with mindsets, with value systems to form those systems, to form those institutions, and because they didn't get it right at the level of values and at the level of behaviors, you see that the systems and the institutions become weak and they cannot sustain themselves. So why do we need to design, social transformation? We can say that without social transformation, policies will go to waste. So economic policies will suffer poor adoption. Infrastructure will be unutilized or will be misused. No matter how much infrastructure you build, people will misuse it. I mean, look at the railroads. Look at how vandalism has turned around the railroads because people don't have the right value system to maintain those kind of things. So at what point do we get to where we begin to invest heavily in the values of people? Because it is the intangible part of us that controls the tangible part. So if you don't have a place where, or a continuous investment in values, behaviors, systems, structures, we will eventually have a weak institution, right? Institutions will lack legitimacies. Citizens will engage in behaviors that erode societal gains. And that's where you begin to see things like corruption, because everybody will be trying to self-preserve. Everybody will be sabotaging and self-preserving. So regardless of what we think is communal or collective good, everybody will think about themselves before they think about the next man. And that's why, sometimes when you get to the junction, you see two people, you meet at the junction, maybe there's no traffic, light at that place, light traffic generally, it's not like there's a gridlock. You find out that people find it difficult to think about the other person before themselves. You find it very difficult to prefer the other person before yourself. So how do we begin to have a reawakening of our system to say that, okay, we have to get to a point where we must think about communal living before self-serving living, right? So social transformation will begin to reorientate us into all of these spaces and what we need to do differently. When we are able to embody a proper social transformation architecture within our space, we can be sure that development will be inclusive, will be value-driven and sustainable, because you'll be able to impact knowledge at a transgenerational level. Yeah, you'll be able to impact, because education is also a system. If you look at the educational system of the country, educational system, which is supposed to be the continuous transgeneration evolution of impacted knowledge. Education, as an example of a social institution, is supposed to impact knowledge at a transgenerational level. So can we say that educational system is doing that at the moment? Can we say that the government, which is supposed to maintain law and order, which is supposed to provide leadership, which is supposed to provide the rule of law, have the right values that push the boundaries of those institutions in the right direction? The economic speaks for example, the custodians of the factors of production. Can we say that they are the right values operate within the dimensions of that space? When you look at the work ethic of the average citizenry, do you find out that there is that work ethic, that excellence, that pursuit of excellence in how we carry out our daily activities? Because when you look at the economic space, it's so easy for us to complain about the GDP, about money not being in our pocket. But when you give an average artisan something to do you see that quest for excellence? Do you see that value system of hard work, of integrity? How many of us can vouch for our artisan economy that if we give the average one, because we are a replica of the sum total of the average, if that makes sense. We're a replica of the average of us. So if the artisan economy, I think informal sector now, by Nigerian Bureau of Statistics, accounts for about 92% of workforce. So largely, Nigeria is actually an artisan economy. Can you say that economy embodies the right value for the factors of production, the ethics of production? Do they? So the social institution that is supposed to cater for the economy, how do we ensure that the people components of that institution can deliver on what sustains that institution at a transgenerational level? So sometimes when we sit down to overanalyze and move into learned helplessness about why our nation is not moving forward, we are not considering the right components, and we are not investing in the right components that we ought to invest. I think that that's just a broad stroke on what social transformation is. I'm still going to take time as we go on I'm going to stay on this social transformation and what it does for a while, maybe for the next couple of 1 or 2 weeks. I'm going to dovetail it into what the collective efforts really wants to do, the expression of the collective efforts, and how we have planned to do all of this. the methodologies to engineer social transformation, how we require our sociologists to actually come into the mix. And there's no way I can overemphasize the need for volunteers. When you go to school to go and study sociology and anthropology, and you cannot come out and conduct a basic research on why people in a particular social class do what they do, and we expect that people who are not living, I see data banter around all of the time. There was a very recent data that was given to us that Nigerians, not Africans, Nigerians they are the number one country that gives the most. Who conducted that research? Who funded it? Another part of the conversation that excites me in a way is the GMO. There was a time that the GMO conversation was going on, and I was laughing because there are certain people of the school of thought who believe that the billionaire who's been backing genetically modified organisms as the next alternative for food production has ulterior motive. And I laugh. I'm always like, you want his money, but you don't want his ideas. In which world is that? Does that work? So I'm saying all of that to say that we need to start putting our money where our mouth is, and we need to start putting our mouth where we want our money to be. Right? Sociologists who went to university to study sociology and anthropology need to start to come into platforms like this, and let us engage social intervention projects of social audits. Let's conduct a social audit for religious bias, and within which class does it really exist, and how can we tackle it? Because if we continue to stay at the level where we only talk about the fact that, there's genocide, why is there genocide? Why is there religious genocide? And why are they killing a particular sect? And why is it that that sect does not even retaliate? In the history that I know, there was a sect that used to go to war before and kill everybody. Why did that happen? How can we understand human interaction and relations? And where are our social scientists? Where are the humanities guys? And so that's why we will keep calling for volunteers. And when I say that volunteers should come in, and I think that this is a good place to display the volunteer banner, but you can also check us on all of our social media platforms. These are the things that we need to sit down and map out creative ways to design systems to tackle. How do we tackle the poverty problem? I see a lot of data around being the poverty capital. I don't like to say it, I don't repeat it. But that is somebody's agenda, because let me tell you something. Once you don't have your own agenda, you are leaving another person's agenda. Once Africa cannot wake up to design its own agenda, we will continue to leave out other people's agenda. And what it will require us to design our own agenda is philanthropy and volunteering. Now, volunteering, not just to carry speaker or to carry chair or to go and donate to one orphanage. Volunteering of intellect, sitting down and designing system. Some of us were able to volunteer our minds, our expertise. Some people need to be able to give. Some people need to be, with Africa, Nigeria does not need foreign aid. You don't need to get grants from all over the world. If we can give out of what we have, if you don't subscribe to the crab mentality that is classist around us, because once you see your brother driving a BMW, you think it's your money that he wants to use to prosper. So even if he's doing something that you think you should be part of or you should be contributing to, you say, no, I cannot give him out. No. So you don't embody the mindset of a giver. And the Bible says that out of the hand of the person that does not have, they will collect and give to the person that has. So if you look at the architecture of Africa in a sense, don't you think that our minerals that we think we don't have, our rare metals, our resources that we don't have is being plundered from under us and given to the people that have? Because we do already think we don't have. So once Africa continues to think that, oh, we cannot give, we don't have enough, I can't give to see my country change, I'm still hungry, then we are going to stay where we are. So I'm using this opportunity to advocate for giving. And then I'm using this opportunity to advocate for volunteers. Regardless of the field that you participate in, whether you're a medical doctor, a medical practitioner, you're an engineer, you're a social scientist, there is something to do around social transformation. And we're very well happy to welcome you to the collective effort for social transformation as we begin to develop systems that will change our country one local government, one locality at a time. We want to go into partnership with local governments. We want to go into partnership with systems and institutions and map out real-time strategies to turn around institutions and localities and subnationals for good. If we give a concerted effort to our educational institution, for example, and we pursue reforms, and we pursue reforms through law-based, through funding, there's no reason why our university shouldn't be thriving on massive endowment funds. With the amount of monies we throw around these days, doing all things, frivolous activities, we, by all means, we can carry on with. I won't say they are frivolous, because we like to party. That's who we are culturally. But until we understand that there is a flip side to that, and sometimes you can't just eat your cake and have it, all right? So we're going to continue to push conversations in this direction to make sure that people can come in and be part of us. You can look us up on all of our social media platforms. We'll continue to put out more information about this. We're going to also hope that people begin to come in physically into the space so that we can share on a more granular level, how does this affect the price of bread, as we like to call it, in the market? How do we get what we do to pay on the long run? What are the values of delayed gratification? What are the values of doing the right thing today and having to wait for a long period of time before you see the harvest? And because these are the patterns of life, you don't plant a seed today and reap the harvest tomorrow, right? You have to wait. It's seed time and harvest, not seed time and harvest time. It's seed time and harvest. Right, so the entity of time is also very, very, very important in the mix of getting things, happening in the space. So I'm going to, wrap up here. We're going to talk about methodologies inside. We've developed a full curriculum of about 8 modules for social transformation, and then we will dovetail into certain intervention programs, because they are the soft cells that can help us to create a hard shift in the mind of people. Intervention will allow you to be able to get people to listen to you. So if we get into a locality and we get into interventions like helping them to clean their environment, to try and see why people don't even want to pay bills, right? How do we incentivize that space and say, okay, if this environment is doing well, if we find that this is a very clean environment, we give their children free ride to school. We can put 2 buses or 3 buses within that locality and make sure that people can go to, can take people to schools for free, and make sure that in those buses, there are messages around development, values that those children will listen to over and over and over and over again. And before you know it, they stop littering, they tell their parents, and that's how you create a systemic change. How do we make sure that we can cross-sell, solutions from state to state? Sometimes we always think that Nigeria is the urban centers. We think Nigeria is Lagos and Port Harcourt and Abuja. There are areas where you don't want to see. So how do we cross-sell what is already working in these areas and develop those rural areas so that we can also abate, rural-urban migration? And we can also make sure that the people, we don't have we bridge education disparity. because education disparity will happen when the people in this locality or in this subnational have, exposure and literacy and that is way more advanced than some people in that space. So when they come, or when you have exchange of traffic, people begin to have tremendous culture shock. How do we make sure that our rural areas are also getting heavily, developed? Now, all of this is not to form a parallel government. All of this is to say that no matter how you look at things, there's a citizen side of things. No matter how you look at things, even if it is just for good speech, how to have a proper assessment of what is happening per time and to attempt the right response to those things. Because behavior, don't forget, is a function of actions and inactions to internal or external stimuli. So when you see government move in a particular direction, do we all go raving mad, or do we begin to inductively think about what are the things we now need to do to make sure that we can do or we can respond correctly, and how can this affect our society, right? So how do we want to use media? How do we want to put billboards out there to begin to bring to the consciousness of people what they need to do on a daily basis, and we just don't leave it into some form of vagueness where everybody just thinks that, they're just going to, continue in this anyhowness, and hopefully somehow a miracle is going to happen and we're just going to get to the promised land where we all desire. The promised land that some of us cannot even paint. If I ask you to close your eyes and visualize a Nigeria that works, can you? What is the vision of a working Nigeria that is in your mind? Practice it. Do it for 30 seconds. Close your eyes. Visualize, what does a working Nigeria look like? What does a working educational system look like? What does a working political system look like? Or you just think that the world is going to wake up without the corrupt government? Wake up, that's not going to happen. Corrupt governments are everywhere in the world. Some of the governments of developed nations that we so much like to copy are more corrupt than us. But what are we doing about the oppression within our midst? Because I have a totally different opinion to the conversation. I think oppression is a much more bigger problem than corruption in our community, in our locality, because that's why classism is a form of oppression. The classism that we're so classist as a people, but it's not today. But these are the conversations that we would get to at a transgenerational level. This is a 30-year trip into development. So I want to encourage you to please follow us and please give. I think we will display our account number and we can do that. We ask you to please give. Please join us. Come into Eridan Space and every Sunday. We will continue to invite people. Join us in the collective conversation. We're going to bring in speakers to come in, join us, be a part of the movement. Should I call it movement? I think movement is one of the most abused words these days. But be a part of the conversation. Be a part of change.